An aesthete, an author who dedicated his life to the continuous research of beauty, the man who created the figure of the dandy, becoming it himself in real life, a figure who wants to be known at any cost and who proclaims the aestheticism even if he had a penitent personality and he was known by few. This is what features the personality and the writing of Oscar Wilde with Wilde, a writing which brings the reader to a constant reflection and which awakens his attention. Writer, aphorist, poet, playwright, journalist, as well as Irish essayist, Wilde was born in Dublin the 16th of October 1854. Son of Sir Williams, a doctor, founder of an hospital in Dublin and author of different treatises, and of Jane Francisca Elgee, Irish poetess known with the name Hope, who hid her real age. From her, the author took his eccentricity and his love for literature. The youngest of 3 children, Wilde was educated at home until the age of 9, and after that he attended the Portugal Royal School, the Trinity College of Dublin, and he concluded his studies at the Oxford University, where he could study the Greek classics. During this period he travelled to Italy, Greece, and to all those places related to art and classical culture, also published 7 lyrics and 30 poems. He had a very expensive standard of living that led him to poverty. He wrote for the Dublin University magazine and concluded his studies getting a bachelor in arts. Once arrived in London, he staged the play Agamemnon by Aeschylus, and he became a regular contributor for Pall Mall Gazette, publishing anonymously, under the section The Poet's Corner, the reviews of new books of poetry just published. After the publication of the book intitulated Poems, he was accused of immorality, and the family had to move to America, where Wilde held conferences to make known the figure of European estate. Back to London, he met and married Constance Lloyd, woman of culture, and they have 2 children who caused the unhappiness of the marriage. Although he loved his children and he wrote for them fairy tales collecting the work The Happy Prince and Other Tales, he was dedicated in attending other men. Pushed by his wife, he began to write for the feminist journal The Woman's World, which left in 1889 because bored from that job. During a journey in France, he met Émile Zola and different relevant French authors, some of which accused him of being an avid consumer of opiate Egyptian cigarettes and absinthe. In London again, he began to attend Alfred Douglas, with whom he established a relationship lasted many years, which pointed out Wilde's homosexuality. In 1894, he wrote a number of unfinished works, except the play An Ideal Husband. But his writing did not save him from the trials caused by his homosexuality that sentenced him to 2 years of jail and forced labor. Very important was one letter written during his imprisonment, De Profundis, for his mate Alfred, in which he accused him of being the author of his ethical depravity. When he got out of prison, he tried to be forgiven by his wife. He returned to be poor, and he decided to go back in Paris, where he published The Ballad of Lady Jael. Towards the end of his life, he repented his sexual choices, and he suffered from various diseases, emphasized also by alcohol and opiate. He died on the 30th of November 1900 at the age of 46 years, succeeding to obtain baptism and the last rites. Among the many published works, the most important is The Picture of Dorian Gray, originally published in 1819 on a Lippincott Monthly magazine, and after various revisions it became a novel in 1891. Set in Victorian London in the 19th century, it tells the story of a young Dorian Gray who starts to realize his beauty when the painter Basil Hallward gives him a portrait. Dorian makes a wish that the picture grows old in his place, and he is willing to sell his soul. This pact with the devil is above all instigated by Lord Henry Wotton's speeches. In fact, for Wotton the beauty is all. Dorian starts to attend the suburbs of the city, and in a theatre he meets Sybil Vane, of who he falls in love with. But soon after, the young man breaks up with her to devote himself to the pleasures of life, and the young lady commits suicide, unleashing the anger of the brother James. After the incident, Gray feels guilty, and he notes a change in the picture which assumes a scary grimace, for each act fierce and fair, as if it were the representation of his consciousness. At first, he covered the portrait with a screen, but afraid that he could be seen, he decided to hide it in sold studio room in the attic. So he begins to spend his life devoted to the pleasures, sure that the picture would have changed in his place. One night, the painter Hallward met him in the street, and Gray invited him home for a greeting, and the Basil asks him to see his best work that never would have exposed. Gray takes him in the attic, and the painter was astounded at the sight of how his work became. He asks his friend forgiveness because he was no longer that nice and kind young man he had known before. In his madness, Gray stabs his friend, who believes was the cause of his evils. To get rid of the body, he calls his chemist and friend Alan Campbell, that helps him under threat. The years went by, and while his friends were getting older, he remained young, and he was pleased to see the aging of the portrait. At that point, some rumors started to spread about him, and he decided to go away from London to his estate, with Wotton and painter's niece Gladys Hallward, with which he falls in love. There, during a hunting, Sibyl's brother James will be killed, arousing remorse in the almost 40 Dorian Gray, who decides to turn back good and to destroy the picture, hoping to get rid of what weighed and that evil. Back in London, he goes to his studio. He takes the dagger with whom he had killed the painter and he strikes the portrait. But a strange thing happens. He felt a pain in the heart and he collapses. He was found by his domestic with a dagger in the heart, completely unrecognizable, suppless at the foot of the painting, which was back to be wonderfully young and beautiful. Numerous movies have been made from this novel from 1910 to today, but the most important are the one of 1945 and the one of 2009. The Picture of Dorian Gray of 45, directed by Albert Lewin, with actors like Angela Lansbury in Sibyl Vane, George Sanders in Harry Wotton, Hart Hatfield in Dorian Gray, Donna Reed in Gladys, and Lowell Gilmore in Basil Hallward, it turns out to be very coincident with the book, like the narration of Gray's thoughts and his life narrated by an outside voice. But there are some differences, like the statue of Egyptian god in the shape of cat, to which Gray expresses the desire for eternal youth, which is not present in the book. In the film, Sibyl songs, while in the book she plays different roles, like Juliet of Shakespeare. In the book, the young man is blonde, curly, and with blue eyes, but in the film is the opposite, as well as in the version of 2009. The scene where Basil and Harry are with Gray in the theatre is not the same as in the book, where they go away, disgusted by the way Sibyl is playing, leaving him alone. Also, the lady will never go to Dorian's home, nor she'll never see his portrait. In the film, Dorian breaks the engagement with Sibyl by letter, also sending her some money, but in the book he leaves her in her dressing room. At the beginning of the film, the baby niece of Basil, Gladys, writes her initials in the picture. This particular is absent in the novel. Regarding the film version of 2009 directed by Oliver Parker, named Dorian Gray, which involves actors like Colin Firth in Harry Wotton and Ben Barnes in Dorian Gray, it turns out to be a failure. Prohibited to minors of 40 years, it appears to be in total disagreement with the novel. Among the many differences, they cite some like Gray's kiss to Basil, the representation of a Gray totally libertine, Harry's daughter, Emily, absent in the book, and she replaced the figure of Gladys. Many differences are present in the version of 2009 that go away completely from the excellent masterpiece of English literature of Oscar Wilde, work full of aphorisms representing a way of presenting the life, true celebration of beauty, a profession of faith that the same author follows with his artistic production and with his life, conceived as a successful work of art. But for Wilde, the aesthetic is an experience that can be always right, because the vision of life, like art, implies on one hand the search of pleasure, and on the other a dissolute lifestyle leading to moral ruin, and in the case of Dorian Gray, to crime.